It started with a simple notice on the employee bulletin board. Report all sightings of unauthorized persons after 10 p.m. to management. That's all it said. No names, no photos, not even a description. Just the warning, printed in bold red ink. Sam, a 22-year-old night stalker, barely gave it a second glance. After all, it was just another reminder from corporate to keep an eye out for loiterers. The store had its fair share of strange customers. A man talking to a can of soup. A woman who tried to return a half-eaten rotisserie chicken because it tasted haunted. You get used to weird things on the night shift. But this was different. It was a Wednesday graveyard shift. Quiet. No music playing over the speakers. Just the low hum of the refrigeration units and the occasional click of security cameras panning. Sam was restocking laundry detergent on aisle 6 when he heard the first sound. A soft, dragging shuffle. Not a cart. Not footsteps. It was like something heavy was being pulled across tile. He poked his head around the corner. Nothing. He waited a few seconds, then got back to work. It happened again 10 minutes later. This time, closer. A low dragging sound, followed by a faint thud, like someone dropping a glass jar. Sam froze. He wasn't supposed to be alone. Rachel was working in the back room, and their manager, Ken, was doing inventory in the front. Sam walked cautiously toward the source. Aisle 7. Paper towels, canned vegetables, and dry rice. It was empty, but the feeling wasn't. There was a weird pressure in the air, like the way it feels right before a storm breaks. Fluorescent lights above flickered, only in that aisle. Just for a second. Then everything returned to normal. Maybe a ballast is going, Sam muttered to himself, half hoping speaking would break the unease. He turned to leave, but something caught his eye. A small trail of water leading down the aisle. No broken bottles. No puddle. Just a perfect, narrow line, like someone had dragged a soaked towel along the ground. It ended halfway down aisle 7, and then just stopped. That was the first night. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. He wasn't even sure what he saw. But the next night, it got worse. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the store lights dimmed for 2 seconds. Not the usual power hiccup. This was synchronized. Timed. Sam looked up, then back at the aisle. There he was. A man standing motionless halfway down aisle 7, facing away. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't moving. Just standing. He wore what looked like a soaked trench coat, water dripping steadily to the floor beneath him. But the floor was dry. Completely dry. No footprints. No puddle. Just a sound. Drip. 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 Sir? The store's closed, Sam called out, trying to sound firm but polite. No response. He stepped closer. The man didn't flinch. Didn't turn. Sam stopped 4 feet behind him. The man's coat was frayed, dark brown but stained black near the edges like mold had been growing on it for years. His hair was slicked down, too long for someone's age. Then Sam noticed something else. The air was cold. Way too cold. Freezing, like he'd just stepped into a walk-in freezer. He reached out cautiously. Didn't touch him, just hovered his hand inches away. That's when a man whispered, "I never left." Sam blinked. And just like that, he was gone. No sound. No footsteps. No shimmer or flicker. Just an empty aisle. The chill vanished instantly. Sam ran straight to Ken, breathless. But the security footage showed nothing. Just an empty aisle. All night. Even the lights didn't flicker. Over the next few weeks, it kept happening. Always at 3:13 a.m. Always in aisle 7. Other employees started whispering about it. Sarah claimed she saw the same man looking into the freezer door glass, except he wasn't reflected. Brian said he found wet footprints leading into the stockroom, but they ended at a solid wall. Management eventually took notice. They stopped stocking that aisle at night, left it dark, told staff to avoid it during graveyard shifts. But Sam couldn't let it go. He started digging. The store had only been around for 6 years, But before that, the property had been a laundromat, one that burned down in the 90s. No deaths were recorded officially, but an old Reddit thread mentioned a missing man, a former employee who vanished during a late shift. Witnesses said he went into the back with a mop bucket and never came back out. Police never found a body, just a mop tipped over near a drain in the floor, and a faint trail of water leading out the back. Sam began documenting every sighting: time, temperature, light behavior, even scent. Once it smelled like pond water, strong enough to make him gag. Then came the final incident. Sam set up his phone to record down aisle 7, propped it against a pack of paper towels. He watched the time tick closer, 3:13. The lights dimmed, the temperature dropped, and the man appeared. Only this time, he turned around. His face was bloated, pale, like it had been underwater for years. His eyes were too wide, glassy, and lifeless. His mouth hung slightly open, not in surprise or fear, but in vacancy. His skin dripped with water that never hit the ground. Then he pointed at Sam and whispered, not with anger, but sorrow, "You didn't help me." The lights snapped back. The man vanished. And Sam's phone? It was gone. Not stolen. Not moved. Gone. The video footage stopped at 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 59 seconds. The device was never found. Sam quit the next day. But others who work there now, they say sometimes if you walk past aisle 7 late at night, the shelves rattle. Not from air vents or vibration, but like someone brushing against them. And if you stand there long enough, you might see the water trail forming, leading nowhere, ending at your feet, because some customers never really leave, and some employees were never really found. It was a Thursday evening when Sam took the closing shift at the local grocery store. Not his usual schedule. He was covering for a coworker who'd called out sick. The store was usually quiet at night, almost too quiet. The occasional late-night shopper, the distant hum of the freezers, the flickering buzz of a dying ceiling bulb. Nothing out of the ordinary at first. Around 11:15 p.m., with only 45 minutes until closing, Sam began his routine, fronting the aisles, cleaning up loose produce, checking inventory counts. He always left the freezer section for last. Not because it was difficult, but because something about that long, narrow aisle unsettled him. The cold wasn't the issue, it was the silence. The soundproofing in that part of the store always muffled everything. Even the music piped through the speakers sounded distant and hollow. That night, he entered the freezer section and immediately felt it. That shift in the air. Not just the temperature drop, but something heavier. As he walked past the frozen dinners, his footsteps echoed unnaturally, like the sound was bouncing off something invisible, like he wasn't alone. He shrugged it off. A trick of acoustics. Nothing more. He turned the corner to the far end, where the glass doors lined the wall. One of them, door number 8, was slightly ajar. That was odd. Those things were heavy and usually clicked shut automatically. He pushed it closed and felt a brief resistance, like something was in the way. But when he looked inside, there was nothing. Just bags of frozen peas and mixed vegetables, neatly stacked. As he stepped away, the door creaked back open again. Sam paused, staring at it. Then, he heard it. A soft breath. It was unmistakable. A quiet, human exhale. Not from the speakers. Not his own. It was right behind glass. He jerked back, knocking into a display of frozen pies behind him. The door to freezer 8 slowly closed again on its own. He held his breath, listening. Nothing now. Just the distant hum. No footsteps. No breath. Silence. He reached for his walkie and called to the manager, Dana, who was up front doing registers. "Hey, Dana, did anyone else go in the freezer aisle?" "Nope. Just you and me in the building," she replied casually. You sure? Pretty sure I'd notice if someone came in through the loading dock. Cameras haven't picked up anything. Why? Sam hesitated. No reason. Thought I heard something. He ended the call and glanced back at the freezer doors. All shut now. All normal. He finished the aisle quickly, not wanting to be in there any longer than necessary. The next day, he came in early to grab a few things before his shift. As he walked past the freezer section, he saw two technicians working near door number 8. One of them had removed the entire glass panel. Everything okay? Sam asked. Door's been fogging up on the inside, one of them replied. And there's some condensation building behind the insulation. Looks like it hasn't been maintained in a while. Sam nodded, but noticed something. The wall behind the removed door panel wasn't solid. It had a strange seam, like a covered-up vent or an old access point. He asked the tech about it. Yeah, some of these old stores used to have crawl spaces or utility shafts behind the freezers. Most of them are sealed off now. Fire code stuff. Later that night, curiosity got the better of him. After close, Sam walked back to freezer 8. It looked normal again, but when he tapped the back panel, it sounded hollow. That's when he heard the whisper. Not a word, just a long, slow whisper that trailed off like someone exhaling into his ear. He froze. The breath wasn't cold, it was warm. Spinning around, there was no one. The aisle was empty. He backed away, never taking his eyes off the freezer. That night, he dreamt of someone locked behind the wall, eyes wide open, mouth moving but no sound coming out. A woman, pale, frostbitten, trying to speak through layers of ice. The dreams grew worse over the next few nights. Every time, the same face, the same silent scream. Sam began to dread his shifts. He noticed small things now. Items moving in the freezer aisle when no one was around, the freezer door creaking open at exactly 11:17 every night. Always freezer 8. One night, just before closing, Dana pulled him aside. You've been weird lately, she said. Everything okay? Sam tried to explain what he'd heard, what he'd seen. Dana looked at him strangely, then sighed. You don't know the story, do you? Sam blinked. What story? She lowered her voice. About 8 years ago, before you started, a woman went missing. She was last seen walking into this store. CCTV showed her entering. No footage of her ever leaving. Sam's blood ran cold. Cops investigated. Never found anything. Some said she must have slipped out undetected. But there was a rumor. Dana paused. One of the overnight stalkers swore he heard screaming behind the freezer wall. He said it sounded like someone was trapped inside the insulation. Sam couldn't speak. He remembered the warm breath, the face in his dreams. They sealed the shaft not long after, Dana said. But the guy who reported it quit the next day. Sam turned and looked toward the aisle. The freezer light flickered once, like it knew he was watching. That night, Sam stayed late after his shift. He brought a crowbar from his car. At 11:17 p.m., freezer 8 creaked open on its own. He waited. Nothing. Just silence. Then the whisper again. He pried open the back panel. Beneath the insulation, he found the sealed shaft. A narrow crawl space, no wider than a vent. It smelled of rust and mold and old air that hadn't moved in years. Something glinted inside. He reached in with a flashlight and pulled out a small pendant necklace. A locket. Inside was a photo of a woman. Her eyes were wide. Her smile frozen in a moment before whatever happened to her. Sam never returned to work after that night. The pendant was turned over to the police anonymously. The case was quietly reopened, but the store never closed, and freezer 8 still creaks open at exactly 11:17 p.m. every single night. There's something oddly comforting about a 24-hour supermarket. No matter how late it gets, you can always count on the automatic doors sliding open, that sterile scent of cleaning products mixed with overripe produce, and the low, almost hypnotic hum of the freezers. It's a strange little ecosystem, familiar, routine, safe. Or at least it should be. In 2016, a night stalker named Travis began working at a mid-sized chain grocery store in Oregon, the kind of place tucked between a gas station and a shuttered mall. Business was slow after 10 p.m., so management kept overnight staff minimal. One manager, one security guard, and 2 to 3 stalkers depending on the shift. Travis was assigned the 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. window, mostly working the cleaning and restocking circuit. During his second week, he started hearing about another employee, one he'd never met. The guy's name was Jeremy, and according to other employees, he'd been there for years. But here's the thing, he only worked after midnight. Not at midnight. After. As in, he'd clock in sometime between 12:30 and 1 a.m. and clock out before sunrise. That wouldn't be strange, except no one had ever seen him arrive or leave. At first, Travis thought maybe Jeremy was just a loner or had one of those silent personalities that made him invisible. He even joked to his manager, asking if Jeremy was a vampire. The manager didn't laugh. He just looked up from his clipboard and said, "Don't bother him. He finishes what we can't." The reply stuck with Travis for reasons he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't what the manager said, but how he said it, like it was rehearsed. Like he was repeating a rule, not an opinion. A few nights later, Travis stayed late to help with a backed-up delivery. Around 12:45 a.m., while organizing jars of marinara sauce, he noticed something strange. The far end of aisle 6, where the lights had been dimmed due to a sensor malfunction, suddenly flickered to life. He was alone at that end, or so he thought. Someone was standing there, pale blue vest, stocking shelves methodically. He moved slowly, but not sluggishly. More like rhythmically, precise, mechanical. Travis called out, "Hey, Jeremy?" No response. The man didn't even flinch. Curious, Travis walked toward him, footsteps echoing. As he got closer, he noticed the man was placing soup cans with almost mathematical alignment, each label facing exactly the same direction, all spaced evenly, one after the other without pause. No cart, no box nearby, just the cans appearing from somewhere. When Travis reached the aisle, the man was gone. No footsteps, no movement, just vanished. But the cans were still there, neatly lined in the exact place Travis had seen them placed. It was like someone had removed the middle of the film reel and skipped ahead. The next day, Travis asked the security guard, Jim, if he could check the CCTV footage from the night before. Jim was hesitant but agreed. They fast-forwarded to 12:45 a.m. The footage showed Travis organizing the sauces. Then, in real time, the lights in aisle 6 flicked on. But the aisle was empty. No Jeremy. Not even a flicker. Just Travis walking toward an invisible force and stopping, looking confused, then leaving. Jim quietly shut the monitor and muttered, "You saw him, didn't you?" Travis didn't answer. That night, Travis noticed a strange routine emerging. Shelves that were untouched by the regular night crew were always fully stocked by morning, perfectly aligned, even in areas with no assigned employee. Management never mentioned it. Neither did anyone else. But it kept happening. Eventually, Travis started leaving small tests. He'd stack items sloppily or leave one upside down on purpose. And every time, by morning, they'd be corrected, without a trace of human intervention. He grew obsessed. He even tried hiding in the break room to catch Jeremy in the act. He stayed until 3 a.m., sipping stale coffee and trying to stay awake. Around 2:17 a.m., the break room lights flickered briefly. When he emerged, the store was silent, but several carts had been moved and 3 aisles were mysteriously restocked. That same night, Travis saw something else. In the freezer section, one of the doors had fogged over. Inside, barely visible through the glass, was a human handprint, not like someone pressed it gently, No, this one was distorted, almost as if it had been smeared while clawing. Fingernail trails dragged down into the frost. Travis left early that night and didn't come back for 3 days. When he returned, things had changed. There was a different guard, different manager. No one mentioned Jeremy anymore. When Travis brought it up, the new manager furrowed his brow and said there hadn't been an employee by that name in the system for over a decade. Digging deeper, Travis found an old staff photo in the break room archives, faded and slightly water-damaged. At the far right stood a man, tall, lean, empty-eyed, wearing a blue vest. He didn't smile like the others. He just stared at the camera, unblinking, like he knew something they didn't. On the back of the photo, scrawled in black marker, Jeremy, Night Stalker, deceased 2004. No one talked about what happened. Travis quit not long after. He said the final straw wasn't the shelves that stocked themselves or the lights that responded to footsteps that weren't there. It was a note he found in his locker, folded, unmarked, just a sentence. Stop watching me. No handwriting, no initials, just cold ink on yellow paper. He left his vest on the floor and walked out. Never went back. The store is still open. Still 24 hours. Still insists the night shift runs with minimal staff. And every morning, like clockwork, the shelves are perfectly stocked, especially after midnight. No one knows who does it. But if you ever wander into the supermarket past 1 a.m., check aisle 6. And don't say his name out loud. It was my third week working the night shift at Hillgrove Market. The store sat on the edge of town, tucked behind a defunct gas station and a stretch of fog-choked trees. Business was slow most nights, the kind of shift where you'd spend more time facing shelves and listening to the hum of flickering lights than actually interacting with people. There were 4 checkout registers. Only 3 were ever used. Register 1 was the default. 2 and 3 were backups if things got busy. But Register 4, that one was different. It wasn't broken. It wasn't outdated. It just wasn't used. No one told me outright at first. They just avoided it, like it was a shared understanding. On my first night, I went to turn it on. Jerry, the assistant manager, was at the end of the lane restocking candy bars. He looked up so fast I thought he'd hurt his neck. Not that one, he said, sharp but almost hushed. Just leave Register 4 alone. I remember blinking at him. Why? Is it busted? He hesitated. Just don't. It's store policy. Store policy. That's what they all said. But no one explained it. Not Jerry. Not Tanya, the shift lead. Not even Miss Geraldine, who'd worked there since the early 90s and had a reputation for knowing everything. I didn't press. I needed the job, but it bothered me more than it should have. The register looked completely ordinary. Same setup, same screen, same drawer. The only difference was the key. It wasn't missing or broken. It was taped down with a strip of dull yellow paper. On it, written in smudged marker, were 4 words. Do not open. Ever. It felt like a joke. A weird attempt at hazing new hires. Still, I avoided it. Everyone did. Until that night. It was a Wednesday, and the storm that had been stalking the forecast all week had finally broken loose. Rain hammered the glass doors, and the wind made the front awning creak like it would rip right off. Around 2:30 a.m., we lost power. The emergency lights kicked in, a sickly orange glow that barely lit the aisles. Tanya called the main office, but the lines were down. I was at Register 1 when the system flickered back to life, partially. Registers 1, 2, and 3 stayed dark. But Register 4, powered on. It booted up without prompting, screen glowing a deep green, like an old monochrome terminal. The air felt colder. I remember thinking the hum in the ceiling sounded louder near it, deeper. Tanya noticed. She walked over slowly, flashlight shaking in her grip. Don't touch it, she said. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes were hard. Just pretend it's not on. But it was hard to ignore. The screen flashed once, then displayed a single line of text. One transaction pending. A transaction? At 2:30 a.m.? In the middle of a blackout? No one had been near it. The register wasn't connected to Wi-Fi or mobile payments. It couldn't generate remote sales. At least, that's what we thought. Then the receipt printer churned out a slip. I picked it up. No one stopped me this time. It listed a single item. Return. Item number 000. Payment accepted. Cashier 000. Time 2:33 a.m. There was no amount, no barcode, no name, just blank. The drawer opened on its own. It let out a sharp ding, like every other register. But instead of coins or bills inside, there was a folded piece of paper and something else, a single rusted key. The paper had been torn from some kind of old ledger. On it, scrawled in frantic handwriting, was a warning. It's not a register. It's a gate. Every transaction makes it stronger. Stop before it balances the count. I turned to Tanya, but she was already backing away, muttering something under her breath. Her flashlight beam shook wildly. She wouldn't come closer. And then the bell above the door rang. Only the doors didn't open. They couldn't. The automatic doors were locked during power outages, and we hadn't heard the click of the manual latch. Still, the bell chimed again. Once, twice, then 3 times. Tanya screamed and ran to the back office. I was frozen, staring at Register 4. The screen changed again. Customer approaching. Remain at post. The air pressure dropped. My ears popped. It felt like the room was shrinking, pulling inward. Then I saw it. A figure halfway down the aisle, standing perfectly still in the dark. It wasn't wet from the storm. It wasn't breathing. It just stood there, head tilted slightly, arms hanging at its sides. I blinked, and it was closer, one aisle over. I don't remember deciding to move, but I did. I slammed the drawer shut, ripped the power cord from the wall, and backed away. The lights flickered, just enough for me to see that the figure was now standing directly in front of Register 4. It raised one hand and pointed down at the drawer. The key inside was gone. I heard Tanya yelling from the back. She had locked herself in the office and was trying to radio someone, anyone, but it was just static. When I turned back, the register was off again. No screen, no drawer open. The receipt was still in my hand, but the words were gone. Blank thermal paper. No one believed me, of course. I didn't expect them to. But Tanya quit the next day. Didn't even wait for her paycheck. She left her name tag and walkie in the break room and just vanished. Management replaced her within a week. The new supervisor, Malik, seemed decent. On his first day, he asked why Register 4 had tape on it. I told him store policy. We don't use that one. He raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. Why? Is it broken? I started to answer, then stopped. Just trust me, I said. Leave it alone. That night, I stayed late to finish inventory. Around 3 a.m., as I walked past the checkout lanes to grab my bag, I heard the printer. Just one receipt, still warm in my hand. No words, just a barcode and my name. It started with events. No one really notices the little things in a supermarket. The cracks in the floor tiles, the flicker of old lights, the soft mechanical sighs behind the shelves. But when you're working the late shift, those details become louder, heavier. I worked inventory at a mid-sized grocery store in Pennsylvania. Not old enough to be historic, not modern enough to feel clean. It had a strange stillness after 11 p.m., the kind that made the metal carts seem too loud and every automatic door hiss feel like a whisper being cut off. The stockroom was my territory. A narrow, windowless back area stacked high with boxes, plastic-wrapped pallets, and the occasional forgotten crate that no one could remember ordering. It smelled like cardboard and freezer burn. For the most part, it was quiet. That is, until the walls began to talk. At first, it was just murmurs. Faint, fleeting, like someone whispering from the other side of the drywall. The first time I heard it, I actually turned to check if someone had come in. I thought maybe the manager had returned after hours, or a co-worker was messing with me. But I was alone. The door was still sealed shut. I convinced myself it was the air duct system. Sound carries strangely in those places. But that explanation wore thin quickly. By the end of the week, the whispers had gained shape. They weren't just noise anymore. They were words. Don't stack them there. Too heavy. She's watching. They were never loud. They didn't shout or scream. Just calm, hushed voices. Male and female, like people speaking in the middle of a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. I couldn't pinpoint their source. One night it sounded like it came from the far wall near the dairy crates. Another night, it was behind a rolling door where we stored expired stock. I told my supervisor. He laughed it off. Sick building syndrome, he said. Or maybe your brain's playing tricks. Fluorescents mess with you after a while. That didn't explain why the whispers sometimes responded to what I was doing. One night, I dropped a box of pasta sauce. The crash echoed in the stockroom, thick red pooling under the cans. Clean it, before she sees. The voice was right behind me. I turned so fast I nearly fell. Nothing, not even a breeze. I backed out of that room and refused to finish my shift. The next day, I found a sticky note on my locker. It had no name, just 6 words. Stop listening. They remember your face. I never told anyone. Who would believe me? But I started paying attention more, reviewing CCTV footage, checking audio logs, scanning the stockroom walls for intercoms, speakers, anything. There was nothing. No wires, no hidden recorders, no holes in the drywall. But something else caught my eye. Old pencil marks near the base of the southern wall. Faint tallies. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Like someone had been keeping track of something. That night, I pressed my ear against the same wall. What I heard chilled me deeper than any whisper ever could. Crying. Soft, rhythmic, childlike sobbing. It went on for minutes. No words. Just the sound of grief bottled up in drywall. And then a voice, clearer than ever before, right into my ear. Help me. I stumbled back, heart slamming in my chest. My first instinct was to tear the wall open. I grabbed a box cutter and drove it into the drywall, slashing long vertical lines into it until dust and insulation spilled out. No one was there. No child. No space big enough for someone to hide. Just old fiberglass and rusted piping. But on the other side of the insulation, I found something. A gap. Narrow, maybe 6 inches deep, framed between 2 beams. At the bottom, buried beneath torn foam and plastic, was a yellowed piece of cloth, like a child's shirt. And tucked inside it, a name tag. One of ours. Kelly M. I didn't recognize it. I asked the managers. No Kelly M. had ever worked here, at least not in the past 5 years. I went through old payroll records when no one was looking. That's when I found her. Kelly Monroe. Part-time night shift inventory. Vanished in 2017. No police report. No press. Just a termination record marked no-show, presumed quit. I went back to the wall. This time, I didn't hear whispers. Just breathing. Heavy, shallow, timed with mine but not mine. A second presence. I could feel it in the air like static before lightning. I left that job the next morning. 2 weeks later, I got a package at my door. No return address. Inside was a copy of a security tape. My final night at the store. I watched it, expecting to see myself, paranoid, maybe staring at the wall, maybe talking to myself. But what I saw instead, there was someone else in the footage. A girl, pale, dressed in a faded yellow shirt. She stood in the corner behind me, unmoving, watching. She was there for the full 6 hours of my shift. I never turned around once. I worked the night shift at a supermarket on the outskirts of town. Not a big chain, just one of those independent places that felt like it was stuck in a different decade. The flickering fluorescent lights, the creaky linoleum floors, the old mechanical cash registers that still printed receipts longer than your forearm. It was quiet most nights. Too quiet. One Thursday around 2:40 a.m., I was manning register 2. We didn't get many customers at that hour, but an older man came in. Tall, pale, wearing a black wool coat despite the summer heat. He moved slowly, methodically, picked up a can of soup, a lighter, and a single red apple. He didn't say a word as he placed the items on the belt. The moment I hit total, the receipt printer went wild. It didn't just print the normal slip. It kept going and going. The paper spooled out like a serpent slithering across the counter. At first, I thought it was a glitch or maybe a hardware malfunction. But then I looked at what it had printed. It wasn't numbers. No prices. No item names. Just a single line over and over in faint gray ink. You die on July 19th at 3:01 a.m. I stared at it. July 19th. That was less than a week away. I looked up to ask the man if he'd seen this. But he was gone. No footsteps. No door chime. Just gone. The camera footage later showed the register printing on its own. Nobody in front of it. I told my manager the next morning. He chalked it up to the register being temperamental and suggested I take a break. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I imagined it. But I kept the receipt. Something told me I shouldn't throw it away. That week, things changed. I started waking up at exactly 3:01 a.m. every night. Not 3 o'clock. Not 3:02. Always 3:01. No noise. No dreams. Just my eyes snapping open, cold sweat on my back, heart pounding like someone had whispered my name seconds before. Then came the shifts in the store. Stockroom lights flickering without power issues. Products appearing in my cart that I hadn't picked up. Voices murmuring in the aisles long after closing. Always just out of earshot. I started leaving early. My coworkers said I looked pale, drawn, like something was eating me from the inside. On July 18th, the day before the date on the receipt, I tried to throw it away. I burned it in a metal bin behind the store. Watched the edges curl and blacken, the text fade into ash. That night, I slept through. No 3:01 wake up. I thought maybe it was over. But the next day, when I arrived for my shift, I found the exact same receipt sitting on register 2. Clean. Unburned. The ink was darker this time. Almost bold. Almost certain. You die on July 19th at 3:01 a.m. That night, I didn't go to work. I locked all my doors, unplugged everything, and sat on my bed with a knife and my phone in my lap. Just in case. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? A receipt told me I'm going to die. They'd laugh, or worse, they'd hospitalize me. 2:59 a.m. The house was silent. Not even the hum of the fridge. That was the first thing I noticed. Absolute silence. 3 a.m. Then the lights went out. Every single one. The house plunged into a void of darkness, so pure I felt like I was underwater. My phone screen refused to turn on. The knife felt brittle in my hand. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something was in the room with me. Not walking. Not breathing. Just watching. Close. Too close. 3:01 a.m. Nothing happened. No sound. No pain. I was still sitting there, frozen. Then, the lights flickered back on. The house was empty. My phone restarted. Everything was normal. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe it was some cruel joke. A supernatural bluff. Maybe I wasn't meant to die, just to believe I would. Relief washed over me like a warm wave. Until I turned around. Pinned to the wall behind me was another receipt. The exact same font. Same gray ink. But the message had changed. You died at 3:01 a.m. I stared at it. My heart started racing again, but the rest of me didn't move. I tried to raise my hand. Nothing. I tried to scream. Nothing. Then I looked in the mirror. There was no reflection. I worked night shift security at a mid-sized supermarket in a quiet suburb. It wasn't the kind of place that invited much trouble. Mostly empty aisles, flickering fluorescents, the hum of refrigeration units. The kind of job where boredom was your biggest threat. That changed the week we got the new CCTV system. The cameras were updated to HD, with infrared night vision and a split-screen loop of the entire store. 12 angles. Frozen food. Main entrance. Loading dock. Break room. I watched them all from the security office. A tiny room tucked in the back with peeling linoleum and a faint smell of damp cardboard. The first night I noticed it, I thought it was a glitch. One of the cameras, camera 6, aimed at aisle 3, showed something odd. Every time the loop came back around, I saw what looked like a person just barely visible behind the shelf of King Goods. They didn't move. No distinguishing features. Just a dark blur, like someone frozen mid-step, head tilted slightly forward like they were watching. I scanned the rest of the store. Walked aisle 3 myself. Empty. Not even footprints on the freshly buffed tile. But the figure was still there on the screen, flickering back into view every 30 seconds when the loop restarted. I told myself it was just lag, maybe a delay in the feed. But every time I checked, camera 6 showed that same figure. Same posture. Same tilt of the head, like a still frame caught in a loop. Watching. By the third night, I started to feel in the building something was off. The air in the security office got heavier, like there wasn't enough oxygen. The lights in aisle 3 began to flicker in rhythm with the camera loop. Just that aisle. Every 30 seconds. A brief buzz, then dark, then light again. I asked maintenance about it. They said the wiring had just been replaced. I started leaving sticky notes for myself. Dates, times, screenshots, just to prove I wasn't losing it. But even the screenshots didn't hold up. I printed one out, just a grainy frame of aisle 3, and the figure was gone, as if it refused to be captured outside the loop. Then came the fourth night. I was reviewing footage from the previous shift, scanning through the archives, just to be sure I hadn't missed anything. And that's when I noticed it. The figure in camera 6, it had moved. Only slightly. From one frame to the next. It was closer to the edge of the aisle. Closer to the camera. It wasn't frozen anymore. It was progressing. Deliberately. But only in the archived footage. Not in a live feed. It was as if whatever it was didn't want me to see it move. Not in real time. Only after. Only when it thought I wouldn't notice. But I did. And I wish I hadn't. On the 5th night, I found it in multiple cameras. Not just camera 6. Now it was in camera 4 too, the stockroom. The figure had no real features. It was more like a silhouette, as if a shadow had been peeled off the wall and given the shape of a man. No eyes, but I could feel it watching. And then, the loop changed. It was subtle at first. Camera 6 began showing angles that didn't exist. Aisles that bent too far. Products that had never been stocked. Once, I saw the dairy aisles stretching into darkness. Shelves sagging under the weight of milk cartons stamped with dates from the 1970s. Another time, the loop paused, held on the figure for 2 seconds longer than it should have. As if it knew I was there, staring back. The other cameras continued normally. But camera 6 was becoming something else. I stopped sleeping. The feed haunted me. Even off shift, I kept thinking about it. I saw its shape in traffic mirrors, in the blank static of my television, even in puddles. Always watching. Always just at the edge of sight. My manager didn't believe me. Said it was fatigue. Stress. I even let him watch the footage. But when he looked at the screen, camera 6 was empty. Just aisle shelves. No figure. Nothing unusual. But the moment he left the room, it returned. I started recording the loop on my phone, trying to catch it directly. The videos came out corrupted. Just a high-pitched whine and black frames. But when I replayed them in the security office, they played normally. Which meant, whatever it was tethered to the system. Bound by the loop. By the 6th night, I realized it wasn't just watching anymore. It was learning. The figure appeared in camera 1, facing the employee exit. Closer to me. It had never been that close before. The loop started skipping frames, stuttering like an old VHS. Lights began to flicker across the store, one aisle at a time, like footsteps, getting nearer. Then enter the office. Not in person, not physically, but the feed on camera 12, the one pointed at me, started showing me staring at the monitor as expected. But then I blinked in the footage, except I hadn't blinked. I was staring, eyes wide, and the footage showed me blinking, slowly, deliberately, and smiling. That's when I heard the door creak. There was no one there, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft whir of the looping footage behind me. But the door had moved, slightly ajar now. I closed it, wedged a chair beneath the knob, sat back down. The loop continued, and so did the figure, now standing just inches away from the security office in camera 8. Waiting, watching, looping. Night 7, I didn't go in. I quit. No notice. Just walked away. But the footage still plays in my head, 30 seconds at a time. Because the thing about loops is they don't break. They wait. And if you ever see something watching you from screen, especially when no one else can, don't stare too long. It might just blink back. I used to work night shift at a 24-hour grocery store just outside of town. One of those big box chains where the lights never dim and the background music never stops. Most nights were quiet. You'd get the occasional insomniac or third shift trucker buying jerky and Red Bull. But for the most part, it was just me, the hum of the refrigerators, and the hollow buzz of the overhead lights. It was early November when she started showing up. I noticed her the first time because she didn't enter like a normal customer. She stood outside the automatic doors for nearly 5 minutes before they opened for her. And even then, she didn't move at first. Just stared into the store like she was waiting for something or someone to acknowledge her. She wore this thick gray shawl, even though it was still mild outside. Her hair was long and wiry, like it hadn't been brushed in days, and her skin looked stretched. Not tight like from age or surgery. Just unnatural, like she wasn't used to wearing it. She walked straight past me and headed toward the back, where the meat coolers were. Now, it's not unusual for customers to head there first, especially at night. The clearance meat section is a hidden gem for bargain hunters. But she didn't look like she was shopping for a deal. She didn't browse. She didn't look at labels or prices. She just stood there, completely still, staring into the cooler. I watched her on the monitor for nearly 10 minutes. Then she turned, came to the counter, and asked me something I've never forgotten. "Do you have anything that's gone over?" I paused, thinking I misheard her. "Over." She nodded. "Expired. Past its date. The things you throw away." I told her we weren't allowed to sell expired food, that we discard it or mark it for donation, depending on policy. She smiled, just barely. Her lips didn't fully move. Then she asked, "Can I see it anyway?" I told her no. She left without another word. The next night, she came back. Same time, same stare at the cooler. Same request. "Do you have anything that's gone over?" I started to get uneasy. Something about the way she asked, like it wasn't just about the meat. Like she wanted something wrong. Something spoiled. By the fourth night, I mentioned it to my manager during shift change. He brushed it off as some eccentric lady looking for scraps. "Some people are just weird, man," he said. "As long as she's not stealing, it's whatever." But it wasn't whatever, because on the fifth night, I made a mistake. I just cleared out the expired inventory from the deli cooler. A couple packs of chicken, some ground beef, stuff that wasn't bad yet but couldn't be sold. I hadn't taken it to the back yet, so it was still in a red bin behind the counter. She showed up again. This time, she didn't ask. She pointed. "That." I told her again, "We don't sell that." But she didn't move her hand. Something about her eyes that night, they weren't just tired. They were empty. Not the poetic kind of emptiness, either. More like absence. Like looking into a window that faced a wall. Before I could stop her, she reached over the counter, pulled one of the expired meat packages from a bin and held it to her nose. Her eyes fluttered. She exhaled, slow and shaky. "I can smell the leaving," she whispered. Then she handed me a crumpled $5 bill and walked out, still holding the meat. I didn't chase her. I didn't report it. I don't know why. After that, she kept coming. Every 2 or 3 nights. Always around the same time, between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Always for expired meat. And if I didn't have any, she'd stand in front of the cooler until she got tired or hungry enough to leave. Stranger things started happening in the store. The freezer temperature would spike without explanation, then plummet. One night, the meat cooler's glass fogged over from the inside, and when I wiped it down, I found handprints, small ones like a child's, on the other side. We didn't sell kids' meat. I started asking coworkers if they'd seen her during the day. No one had. She only ever came at night. Eventually, I started setting a single expired item aside just for her. It felt wrong, but it felt worse not to. Then came the last night. She came in later than usual, almost 4 a.m. But this time, she didn't go to the cooler. She came straight to me. "You've been kind," she said. "More than most." There was something in her voice that sounded like gratitude, but not relief. Like she was thanking me for allowing something to continue longer than it should have. She placed a package of raw pork on the counter. I hadn't even noticed her take it. The date on it wasn't expired yet. "It's almost ready," she whispered. "Let it turn." She left before I could say anything. I didn't see her again after that. I quit 2 weeks later. Before I left, I checked the inventory logs. That particular pack of pork, we never sold it. We never stocked it. In fact, the barcode didn't even register in the system. It was as if it came from somewhere else. I never saw her again, not in person. But sometimes when I walk past grocery store meat coolers, I catch the faintest scent. Not rot, not spoilage, just the leaving. And I wonder if she ever found what she was really looking for. When I first started working at the new supermarket on the edge of town, everything seemed normal enough, at least on the surface. The layout was straightforward. Produce in the front, bakery on the side, and about a dozen aisles filled with everything you'd expect. The employee handbook came with a detailed store map, and every aisle was clearly numbered. Or so I thought. The first few weeks passed in that dull blur of stocking shelves, helping customers and cleaning spills. But then I started hearing rumors among the night shift workers about an aisle 13. Nobody had seen it, but it was whispered about like an urban legend. An aisle that wasn't on any map, yet it existed somewhere deep in the back of the store. At first, I laughed it off. How could a supermarket have a hidden aisle? That's absurd. But the more I worked late nights, the more I noticed strange things. Some coworkers avoided certain parts of the stockroom, whispering hurriedly if you asked. Others said they'd heard footsteps behind them when no one was there. And then there were the strange sounds, low murmurs, the faint clatter of cans. But when I checked, the aisles were always empty. Curiosity got the better of me. One night, after closing, I stayed behind to investigate. I pulled out the store map from my locker again and studied it under the flickering fluorescent light. It showed aisles 1 through 12, each with the usual products, but no mention of a 13th aisle anywhere. The employee area behind the registers was marked clearly, but I swore I felt like there was something missing. I started wandering through the store, aisle by aisle. The bright overhead lights flickered sporadically, casting shadows that seemed to creep closer. Then just past aisle 12, the canned goods and cleaning supplies, I noticed something odd. A narrow gap, a thin metal divider behind a stack of crates. It wasn't on the map, and no sign marked it. I squeezed through. Behind the crates was a dim corridor, narrower than any aisle I'd seen. The light barely reached the floor. The air was colder here, unnervingly so, and smelled faintly of rust and something metallic I couldn't identify. I walked cautiously, the silence thickening around me. At the end of the corridor was an unmarked door, heavy and gray. It looked out of place amid the supermarket's cheerful color scheme. I hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a long aisle. Shelf after shelf of strange products lined both sides, but none I recognized. There were jars filled with cloudy liquid, packages with no labels, and boxes sealed with faded tape. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, but the air here felt heavy, almost suffocating. I took a step forward, then stopped. A low whisper seemed to brush past my ear, but when I spun around, I was alone. I tried to shake it off and examine the shelves. The jars looked like preserved animal parts, but their shapes were blurred by the cloudy liquid inside. The boxes seemed to pulse subtly, like they were alive. A sudden chill ran down my spine. As I backed up, the door slammed shut behind me. Panicking, I tried to open it, but it was locked tight. I banged on the metal, yelling for help, but the store was deserted, and my voice seemed swallowed by the thick air. The whispering returned, louder now, circling me in a maddening rhythm. Shapes began to flicker in the shadows between shelves. Faces twisted and grotesque peered out from behind jars and boxes, eyes cold and empty. I realized I wasn't alone. I scrambled for my phone to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. The store's Wi-Fi didn't reach this place either. The door remained sealed, the whispering growing into a chorus of unintelligible voices. Then I noticed something else. On the far wall, a faded map painted in peeling black ink. It looked like the store layout, but with strange symbols and warnings in a language I couldn't read. One symbol caught my eye, and I crossed out in red, directly above the words Aisle 13. The map showed a hidden space far larger than this aisle, stretching into darkness beyond the walls. A shiver ran through me. Whatever this place was, it wasn't meant for customers or for employees. Suddenly, the shelves began to close in, narrowing the aisle as if the walls themselves were alive. I backed away, heart hammering, desperate for an escape. Just then, the door clicked and creaked open. Without thinking, I bolted through and slammed it behind me. Back in the familiar hum of the store's normal aisles, I caught my breath and looked around. No sign of the strange corridor or the hidden aisle remained. I checked the map again. It showed no gap where that door had been. I mentioned it to a coworker the next day, a quiet woman who had worked here for years. She looked at me with a hollow stare and said, "You're lucky you got out." Some never do. When I asked what she meant, she just shook her head. Aisle 13 isn't on the map because it's not really part of the store. It's something else, a place where the rules don't apply. I never worked the night shift again. There's something deeply unsettling about hidden spaces in places we think we know. Aisle 13, invisible to the daylight world, seems like a manifestation of all the unspoken fears lurking just beneath the surface of our daily routines. The jars filled with unrecognizable contents and the whispered voices speak to the idea that beneath the facade of normalcy, there are dark layers of reality most choose to ignore. What truly haunts Aisle 13? Is it some twisted remnant of the supermarket's past? Or a liminal space where time and logic dissolve? A thin veil between our world and something else entirely? The warning symbol, the crossed-out eye, suggests this place is meant to be unseen, a secret kept from prying eyes. Those who stumble inside risk losing more than just their way. And perhaps the most chilling part is that the store returns to normal once you escape, erasing any trace that Aisle 13 ever existed. A ghost aisle, feeding off fear and curiosity, waiting for the next unwitting soul to wander through. If you've ever felt that strange pull toward a place that shouldn't be, or heard footsteps when no one was there, remember, some aisles aren't meant to be found, because some doors once opened, lead you far beyond the familiar. That's the story of Aisle 13. But if you ever find yourself wandering the back of a supermarket late at night, remember, some aisles are best left unexplored. They say supermarkets are safe places where you can grab your groceries and go without worry. But sometimes the ordinary hides something deeply unsettling, something you don't see until it's too late. It started on an unusually cold evening in late November. I was working the closing shift at a local supermarket, the kind of place where the last customers trickle in just before the lights go out. Most nights were quiet, the occasional chatter, the beep of the scanner, and the rustle of plastic bags. But that night, something felt off. The moment I saw him, I noticed something strange. He was a customer about average height, wearing a heavy dark coat and a hat pulled low over his eyes. He moved slowly down the aisles, pushing an empty shopping cart. But what caught my attention was how no one else seemed to notice him. No glances, no nods. He was like a ghost walking through a crowded room. I was at the checkout, stacking canned goods, when the security monitor caught my eye. The man was standing near the mirrors in the entrance area, a place designed so you could see yourself from every angle when you walked in. I glanced at the monitor's reflection view and froze. There was no reflection. Every other shopper was mirrored perfectly, their images duplicated across the shiny surfaces. But the man's face, his entire figure, nothing. It was like the mirrors rejected him, swallowed him whole. My heart began to race. Maybe it was a trick of the lighting? A dead pixel on the camera? I shook my head and tried to focus back on my work. But I couldn't stop glancing up. He started moving toward the checkout lanes, slowly but deliberately. The air felt heavier each time he drew closer. Then, out of nowhere, the overhead lights flickered violently, casting sharp shadows that danced across the tiled floor. The hum of the refrigerators stuttered, then went silent. The entire store felt plunged into a heavy, unnatural quiet. He reached my register and said nothing. I looked up to greet him, but his eyes were hidden beneath the brim of his hat, a pale face barely visible in the dim light. I reached out to scan an item, an unbranded bottle of water. The scanner beeped, but something about the man's presence felt wrong. I asked for his loyalty card, but he simply shook his head. Suddenly, the store's PA system crackled, emitting static, and a whispering voice seemed to drift faintly through the speakers. It was indecipherable, almost like a language just beyond hearing, but it made the hairs on my neck stand up. I dared to glance up at the mirrors again, and again, no reflection. The man's image was absent, but a faint distortion shimmered where he stood, like heat haze or a ripple in the air. Then, without warning, the man tilted his head toward me. In that moment, I felt exposed, as if he was looking past me into something deeper, into my fears, my memories. He didn't speak, but his presence was heavy with unspoken warning. The store lights snapped back on, humming steadily. The PA fell silent, and the hum of refrigerators resumed. I blinked, and he was gone. I scanned the aisles desperately, but there was no sign of him. No shopping cart. No footprints. Nothing. I checked the security footage the next day. At first, everything seemed normal. The man walking in, pushing his cart, but when I slowed the video down, the reflection in the mirrors flickered and then vanished completely whenever he passed by. I showed it to the manager, who just shrugged and said maybe it was a camera glitch. But I know what I saw. Since that night, whenever I work the closing shift, I feel like I'm being watched. Sometimes when I pass by a mirror, I catch a glimpse of something, just a flicker at the edge of my vision, something that shouldn't be there. Like the customer with no reflection has never really left the store. And maybe he never will. It started as just another ordinary night shift at the supermarket. I was the closing manager, and like always, my job was to make sure everything was locked up tight before I left. The store had that familiar, eerie silence once the last customers shuffled out. The flickering fluorescent lights, the distant hum of the refrigerators, and the faint echo of empty shopping carts rolling down the aisles. That night, something felt off. I can't explain it, but the air was heavier, thicker, like the store itself was holding its breath. I shrugged it off as just fatigue, but as I walked through the aisles, locking doors and flipping off switches, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. At around 11:30 p.m., I was doing my usual check of the stockroom. The place was cluttered, cramped, filled with tall metal shelves and endless boxes of inventory. As I moved down the aisles, I heard something, a soft scratching sound coming from the back corner near the employee lockers. At first, I thought it was just a rat or a stray mouse. But the scratching wasn't random. It was deliberate, almost rhythmic. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" But there was no answer. The scratching stopped. I told myself it was nothing and kept walking. I finished locking the main doors, double-checked the alarms, and headed toward the exit. That's when the intercom crackled to life. Static filled the speakers, but beneath it, I thought I heard a whisper, almost like a voice calling my name. I paused, heart pounding, but the message didn't repeat. Trying to calm myself, I made my way to the staff room for a quick break. I sat down, pulled out my phone, and flicked on the flashlight app to scan the room. That's when the power flickered, then went out entirely. The whole supermarket was plunged into darkness. The emergency lights kicked on, casting long, orange shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I fumbled for my keys to unlock the door and get out, but the lock was stuck. I twisted harder. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl, coming from somewhere inside the building. Not a growl like any animal I'd ever heard. This was something deeper, more sinister. It echoed through the aisles, reverberating off the metal shelves. I froze. Suddenly, the emergency lights blinked again and went out, leaving me in complete darkness. My phone's flashlight was my only source of light now, and even that felt weak against the oppressive blackness. I started moving slowly toward the exit, every step careful and deliberate. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something not quite human. It was tall, hunched, with long limbs that bent at unnatural angles. It moved silently, but with a predatory grace. I couldn't tell if it was watching me or stalking me. My heart hammered so loud I was sure it could hear it. I backed away, keeping the flashlight trained on the figure, but it vanished as suddenly as it appeared. I tried the door again, still locked. Panic rising, I realized the locks were electronically controlled and the power outage must have triggered a lockdown. I was trapped. In the darkness, I heard faint footsteps, deliberate, slow, and echoing through the empty store. The sound wasn't like a human's. It was heavier, more methodical. Something was moving closer. I edged back toward the produce aisle, hoping to find a phone or some kind of tool to defend myself. Then I remembered the security office, just a few aisles over. If I could get there, maybe I could access the CCTV system or call for help. The walk felt like an eternity. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every shelf whispered secrets. Then, the emergency lights flickered back on. The store looked normal again, too normal. But I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. I reached the security office, punched in the code, and slipped inside. The monitors flickered to life. The cameras showed empty aisles, empty shelves, except for one. The last camera, pointed at the employee break room, showed a dark figure crouched just out of the emergency light's reach. It was watching the camera, watching me. I stared at the screen, heart racing. Then the figure slowly turned its head towards the camera, and for a brief moment, I saw its face. Hollow eyes stretched too wide, and a mouth that seemed to split open like a rift in reality. The feed went static. The lights in the security room dimmed, then cut out again. In the darkness, I heard the growl again, closer now, right outside the door. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight once more, but it slipped from my hand. In the dark, I heard a scraping sound, something dragging along the floor toward me. I backed into the corner, eyes wide, breathing shallow. The emergency lights flickered back on just as the door handle turned slowly. And then silence. The door was pulled open, and a single beam of light from the hallway spilled in. But there was no one there. I didn't wait to see what might come next. I ran for the exit, keys in hand, heart pounding like a drumbeat. When I finally burst out into the night air, the store's automatic doors slid shut behind me with a mechanical hiss. I called the police. When they arrived, they found no signs of forced entry, no footprints, no disturbance. Only the lock stuck from the power failure. I never worked that shift again. I never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder what else is still locked inside that supermarket. Something that wasn't human. It started with a rumor. Something small, almost forgettable, whispered among the night shift workers at the local supermarket. The kind of rumor you don't pay attention to until it clings to your skin, impossible to shake off. A new employee, a woman named Lisa, had been seen around the store, but no one seemed to remember hiring her, or even meeting her. The first time I saw her, I was stocking shelves late one night. The store was nearly empty, aisles bathed in that sterile fluorescent glow, the hum of the refrigerators like a quiet pulse in the background. I noticed a figure out of the corner of my eye. She was standing at the end of aisle 6, just staring. Her uniform was the same as ours, but it looked off, like it was from another era, faded and worn in ways that didn't match the rest of the crew. I called out, "Hey, do you need help with something?" She didn't respond, didn't even turn, just kept staring at the rows of canned goods like they held some terrible secret. When I looked back a moment later, she was gone. I told my manager the next day, assuming it was just a new hire I hadn't met. But he frowned, confused. "Lisa? I fired her weeks ago. She didn't show up for her first day and then never contacted us again." I laughed it off. Must have been some mistake. But then I started seeing her again, always on the night shift. In the deli, slicing meat with a precision no one else had. In the freezer, cleaning glass panels with an eerie silence. I asked around, but no one else had seen her. The cameras never caught her. When I checked the employee logs, there was no record of her clocking in. One night, I decided to follow her. I stayed back after closing, watching from the shadows as she moved through the store. Her footsteps made no sound. When she reached the back stockroom, she vanished behind the metal door, and the lock clicked shut. I waited, heart pounding. Minutes passed, then I heard it, a faint humming like whispered voices trapped behind the walls. I knocked. No answer. Curious, and maybe a little reckless. I slipped in after her when the manager left to do his rounds. The stockroom was freezing cold, colder than any freezer should be. But what caught my attention wasn't the temperature. It was the wall at the far end, covered in old employee badges, war name tags, and faded photos, all yellowed with age. And among them, taped crookedly in the center, was a photo of Lisa. But this wasn't the Lisa I had seen. This one looked older, her eyes dark and hollow, a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. Underneath the photo was a note written in shaky handwriting, gone but never left. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I saw her, standing behind me, eyes fixed, silent. I spun around, but no one was there. From then on, things escalated. Boxes would fall off shelves when no one was near. The PA system would crackle, with static and the faint sound of a woman whispering. Employees reported cold spots, sudden chills that no heater could explain. The security cameras, on rare occasions, would catch a fleeting glimpse of a pale figure drifting through aisles. But whenever management reviewed the footage, it was just empty shelves and blinking screens. One night, the manager himself confided in me. He told me that years ago, a young woman named Lisa had worked the night shift at this very supermarket. She had been diligent, quiet, almost invisible. But one evening, after her shift, she disappeared without a trace. Despite searches and police reports, she was never found. Rumors spread that she had never truly left the store, that something had taken her, trapping her spirit in the endless aisles and fluorescent glow. The manager said he fired her weeks ago, but maybe she wasn't someone you could fire. Maybe she was someone who never left. I stopped working the night shift after that. But sometimes when I walk past the supermarket during the day, I swear I see her in the window, standing just inside, watching, waiting. Because in places like this, places that hum quietly in the dark, some people don't clock out. Not really. It started with a flicker. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the overhead fluorescent lights in aisle 9 of the supermarket where I worked. But the flicker only happened when I was nearby, as if the lights were reacting specifically to me. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, maybe a loose bulb or a faulty fixture. The kind of thing a night shift worker like me might notice more because I was alone, moving through empty aisles while the store slept. But the flickers grew more persistent. Every time I walked down aisle 9, the lights dimmed and pulsed like a heartbeat, soft at first, then sharper, like they were trying to communicate something I couldn't quite understand. The flickering was subtle, too subtle for anyone else to notice, and always stopped the moment I turned away. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of exhaustion. Working the graveyard shift had that effect, but there was something unnerving about that aisle. It was always colder than the rest of the store, even in summer. The chill wasn't from the refrigerators or the freezer section nearby. It was a cold that seemed to seep into your skin, the kind that makes your breath visible and your nerves fray. One night, after my shift ended, I lingered in aisle 9 longer than usual. I wanted to prove to myself it was nothing, just faulty wiring. But as I stood there, the lights pulsed faster, the flicker turning into brief blackouts. When the lights snapped back on, I caught a glimpse of something standing just beyond the shelves. I blinked. It was gone. I shook it off. My mind was playing tricks on me again. But every night after that, the lights flickered faster, and the shadows around aisle 9 grew thicker, almost tangible. Sometimes when I looked over my shoulder, I thought I saw a figure, a pale face or a silhouette just out of focus. But when I turned to confront it, there was nothing but empty shelves and stale air. The other employees didn't notice anything. They laughed when I told them about the flickering lights. Old building, they said. Electrical problems. But I knew better. I could feel it watching me. One night, determined to catch whatever was haunting that aisle, I set up my phone to record. I hid behind a stack of canned goods and waited. The lights dimmed. The flicker started. My heart hammered. And then, in the glow of my phone's flashlight, I saw it. A shadowy figure with hollow eyes staring straight at me from the end of the aisle. The screen went black. When my phone turned back on, the figure was gone. But the lights above me began to flicker violently, casting long, writhing shadows that seemed to crawl along the floor. I grabbed my phone and ran. The next day, I showed the footage to my manager, but the video was corrupted, only static where the figure had appeared. He told me to stop wasting time with ghost stories and focus on restocking. But I couldn't let it go. I began researching the supermarket's history. The building was decades old, built on land that had once been farmland. There were rumors of strange disappearances, unexplained accidents, and even a fire in the basement years ago, though nothing was officially recorded. One late night, while cleaning near the basement door, the lights flickered again. Only this time, the flicker wasn't random. It pulsed rhythmically like a message. I felt drawn toward the door, an overwhelming urge to open it despite warnings about safety hazards. When I turned the knob, the lights in the hallway behind me went out completely. The flickering stopped. I stepped inside. The basement was dark and cold, the air thick with dust and silence. But then, faint whispers echoed, soft voices murmuring words I couldn't understand. The flickering resumed, this time from an old, hanging light bulb swaying above me, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. I felt a presence close by, something waiting, watching. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut behind me. The light went out, and I was swallowed by darkness. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam caught the pale outline of a figure standing at the far end of the room. Its eyes were empty sockets, its face stretched in an eternal, silent scream. I ran for the door, but it was locked. The flickering light returned in erratic bursts, revealing the figure inching closer, moving without sound. With trembling hands, I kicked the door. It swung open, and I stumbled out, slamming it shut behind me. The lights in the basement hallway steadied. The flickering ceased. From that night on, I avoided aisle 9. I requested a transfer to the day shift, hoping to escape whatever it was that haunted those aisles. But the flickering never stopped completely. Sometimes, when no one else is around, the lights still pulse faintly as I walk past. Like a warning, like a heartbeat, waiting